Hello everyone, my name is Leah Elliott, and today I will be showcasing my investigation into Photoshop and conceptual art. So the main inspirations for this project were Anthony Caltez, the lead God of War conceptual artist on God of War 2018. When I first played that game, I was obsessed with the concept art. The original conceptual artist for Kratos drew Kratos on a napkin, and when I first learned that, it felt very, I guess, relatable. Like it put it into perspective that these people are just humans. This is just another job. So, me being an artist and loving Bob Ross growing up, I decided to combine my two interests for this project and create two paintings, one being of Sakura trees and one being of a ice castle. So, if you don't know Bob Ross, just introduce him real quick. He's a painter on The Joy of Painting. He hosted tutorials every week of his paintings. They're kind of tutorials and kind of showcases, just him walking his viewers along the process of creating a painting and showing that anyone can do it. So, these two are my really big inspirations for deciding to do this. So, Sakura Trees is the first painting. It is about seeing Korean cherry blossom trees for the first time. As you can see, it started off very sketchy, very rough. I laid out the long background. I made it very hilly. I knew I wanted there to be one big sakura tree that was the main draw of the piece that caught the viewer's attention. And I tried to create a sense of 3D explorability within the piece. Like the viewer could walk down there if they wanted to. So the second piece is Prince's Promise. It is a painting about a prince returning home, and it's inspired by fantasy stories with magic and kings. Again, God of War was a really, really great game to me when it first came out, and seeing Anthony's work conceptually just inspired me to create a lot of fantasy themed worlds, just creating whatever I wanted, whatever I thought would be cool to exist. So I really tried to study his early conceptual arts when I was making these two pieces in my sketchbook. So for checkpoint one, as you can see, this is very much a test process or part of the process. I was using brushes for the first time in Photoshop. I hadn't really had any experience with it up until this point painting. I've used Photoshop to edit images and things like that, but it was an experience using it to try and lay out colors and color palettes for the scene, especially for the sakura trees. I was really using cool and warm colors to play with negative and positive space, with the sakura trees having pink and the sunset having red and orange, and then the actual land and the masses within, or the subjects within the piece would be purple to give it more shadow and more uh, contrast to the rest of the piece. And with the Ice Castle one, I was really playing with colors in this one. I was trying to decide how the green looked on the blue, how fire would look within the scene, and I was trying to lay out the direction of the moonlight, how I wanted it to reflect off of certain things like trees and the river. So for checkpoint two, at this point, I had been watching a lot of Bob Ross. I probably had already watched at least 10 videos up to this point and followed along with him. And you can see the pieces have changed a lot since their first conception. You can see the soccer trees is purple and pink, but the newer version is much more pink and green and blue, much more realistic colors that I thought would fit the Korean environment a little bit more. I was also looking at, tourist spots that people would visit. Um, for the ice castle painting, it was a lot of improving based on what Bob Ross would say, like while he was painting. For example, he really doesn't like to use green when it comes to snow. He thinks it looks very bad, so he always would use different shades of blue because you could still get the depth of the snow without making it look puke colored, as he would put it. So I also added the prints in the painting at this point. At first, I didn't know that there was going to be a prince. I knew it was going to be a castle of some sorts. And I did have the stipulations of creating two stories for these pieces, which I developed later on during the final process. But at this point, I did decide that I wanted there to be some sort of traveler visiting the kingdom for the first time, which developed into the prints later on. So the final product, you can really see the development of colors at this point. We have the Sakura tree with a very deep sunset. I actually used a photo I took on vacation as inspiration for the colors, and I think I really nailed the sky, especially looking at how the sun is distinct from the pink. It's not, overtaken by it. It's still its own thing, and it feels like the entire scene is lit by it. I also really tried to change the color of the water based on photos that I had seen and videos that I had seen Bob Ross do. There was one specific one where he did waves in an ocean and he used a red sunset very similar to this. So I watched that video a couple times just to get it really, really correct. And I also had to get over my own personal biases when it comes to painting the Sakura one, in terms of copy and pasting certain elements. Before I did this project, I was very against the idea of duplicating the leaves on the Sakura trees. I felt as if I did it myself, it would make it better if I hand drew every single leaf. However, going through and looking at Caltez's portfolio, he is very clear that he uses texture brushes and is not afraid to copy and paste building pieces for the purpose of creating a better concept. Not only does it save time, it also helps develop the piece 3D, more 3D. It helps the tree look less like it has no leaves and it's bare. So I had to get over my own personal biases in that fact, and I did end up copying a little bit of the Sakura blossoms just to make it look more full. So that's something that I definitely learned while developing that one. And color theory wise, the final really like big thing I learned was on the rocks. You can see I used another idea of Bob Ross's, using more blue and less like green to give things more definition and highlights. So for the ice castle painting, this one has changed the most, I feel, out of all of them. You can see the prince is fully developed, sitting there looking at the moon, pondering on how he's going to claim his kingdom back. And the river also was changed the most. At first, I wanted it to be a waterfall that you could clearly see, like flowing down the side of the painting, but it just didn't feel right. It felt too closed off. So I opened the area more. And again, a lot of this came from advice that I heard Bob Ross saying about making a scene feel 3D. Um, so I really tried to incorporate that here and especially in the mountains. I mean, you can tell those are some Bob Ross mountains right there. I think overall, from this point on, I will definitely keep watching Bob Ross while I'm designing, just because the advice that he gives on color theory and, defining 3D-ness within a space is very helpful, and his advice on trees helped a lot as well. But I did go against his advice in not using green in a piece because I felt that the green helped the castle give it a more cold mood. And I didn't want it to feel as bright and as, I guess, straining to the eye. So I toned it down much more on this, and I looked at Northern Lights pictures for inspiration as well, trying to mimic how the sky looks and how the northern lights are reflected on things within a scene. A lot of which I again had to go back and look at color theory for. So, very thankful for Bob Ross throughout this process. So, designing the ArtStation, this is the final process of my project, was publishing it on ArtStation for people to see. I again looked at Anthony Caltez's website for inspiration for this. You can see it here. He has his biggest pieces on display right at the front. He has his logo. It's very dark themed to match his conceptual art pieces as well. I feel if they were brighter, he may have changed it to like a more gray background, but the black really adds contrast to the conceptual art pieces. So I kept it the same with mine. I kept the dark theme just to give my pieces a little bit more contrast, and I also separated them into their own albums, similarly to how he does here, where he has separate pictures for each portfolio he wants you to look at. So I separated my art station into the conceptual art portfolio and then the all portfolio. So overall, I learned a lot about color theory in this project and Photoshop as a program within the industry. I do think there's some things that Photoshop could improve on, especially when it comes to tutorials. I had to look on YouTube for a lot of tutorials to help with the more technical aspects, like should it be sRGB? Should I use 300 API? Which a lot of things I've learned on my own throughout the course of Kent State's animation game design program, but I definitely recommend if you are going to be a conceptual artist, if it is something that you desire, you need to do research into color theory. Prior to doing this, my pieces were looking flat, not lighted, and overall, I avoided rendering because it kind of scared me. It was intimidating to render a piece and make it look, like it could be real. But Bob Ross and looking into, color theory itself and becoming confident in being able to do that work has helped a lot. And I would recommend that people research before they go into something. It'll help a lot and make you a stronger artist overall. But other than that, thank you guys for listening to my presentation. I hope you guys have a good day and keep painting.